Hello, and welcome once again to Friday Focus, where we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. And today, Friday Focus is going to be taking a look at a kind of a special book in the New Testament. It's the book of James. And I call it special because in some people's minds, it's about faith and works. While in other people's minds, it's really about faith versus works. James, however, presents us with the ultimate description of the relationship between faith and works. Both should make up the life of a believer. But there is a relationship there that needs to be seen. It's been said by some that James looks a little bit like the Old Testament book of Proverbs dressed up in New Testament clothes. Perhaps rightly so, since its focus is consistent with the practicality found in the books known as wisdom literature, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Now, I've chosen some key verses I'd like to share with you. The first one comes from James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. Interesting concept, isn't it? Not at all like many people think today. And then from James chapter 1, verse 19, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Something else that seems a little bit foreign to people today. And then if we take a look at James chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, we read the following. So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it's dead and useless. Wow, that's heavy. Now, someone may argue some people have faith, others have good deeds. But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have any good deeds? I will show you my faith by my good deeds. So he's not discounting faith. He's not discounting good deeds. He said they kind of work in union. And then from James chapter 3, verse 5, in the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And certainly how we have seen that. Just a few words and everybody is up in arms. And then finally, James chapter 5, the latter part of verse 16, something that we ought not to ever forget. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. And so we need to remember that. Sometimes we have not because we ask not, right? So who wrote James? Well, the author is revealed in the very first word, James. Also called James the Just, he is thought to be the half-brother of Jesus Christ. When was James written? Well, James is considered to be the oldest book in the New Testament. Did you know that? Written before the First Council of Jerusalem in 50 AD and before James was martyred in 62 AD. So scholars think that it was possibly written as early as 45 AD. That would be within 15 years of Christ's resurrection. Where did James take place? The letter was probably written from Jerusalem. Why do I say that? Well, James was a chief leader in the church there. And so likely in his position as chief leader in the church, he wrote the book of James. What is James about? The pages of James are laced with direct commands to pursue a life of holiness that is demonstrated in our everyday life. He doesn't coddle the lazy believer or the narcissistic believer. Rather, he presents a faith where the bar is set very high. James's take is that if an individual is going to say they're a Christian, then they ought to live it with zero excuses. Faith that doesn't manifest itself in good works is no faith at all. Note his remarks in chapter 2, actually verse 17. He said, "So you see, faith by itself isn't enough." Now, he's not saying it's not enough for salvation. What he's saying is, as we walk through this world and as we talk the talk, we need to walk the walk. So again, he says, so you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it's dead and useless. Why do we have faith? You might say, oh, wow, it's for salvation. I need to go to heaven and the Lord needs to cleanse me from my sin and I need that salvation. No, it's way more than that. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. There is a completeness when faith is at work in you, producing results. So why was James written? As far as James was concerned, the good news of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ was not just about pie in the sky by and by. It was about the practical outworking of faith in everyday life. Now, throughout his letter, James makes it clear that authentic faith leads to a life of service to others. In other words, good deeds. His whole position is akin to that of his half-brother's teaching found in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. It's not so far-fetched that the half-brother of Jesus should think like him. Like Jesus, James believed that a person's faith should produce real-world effects. You might say that the book of James should be or could be titled No Time for Hypocrites. You see, genuine faith endures through trials, looks to the Lord for wisdom, controls the tongue, has nothing to do with wickedness, and seeks the best for those most vulnerable in our society. James doesn't paint true believers as being perfect. Instead, he lets us know in James 3:2 that we all stumble and fail at times. And so what's his advice to us? Well, it's found in chapter 4, verse 10. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. Right now, as I look over Christendom, I see pockets where it's humble yourself before the Lord, and we will lift ourselves up. You know the old saying, God helps he who helps himself? That's not scriptural. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. In many ways, the letter of Galatians and James are bookend epistles. You see, Galatians highlights the gospel of grace that produces righteous living, while James highlights the righteous living which is a fruit of the gospel of grace. So, what is the James takeaway? What can we learn from James? What can we apply to our life? What can we take into our walk with us? Well, perhaps more than any other New Testament book, James endeavors to shine the divine spotlight on those who make a profession of faith, that their life would manifest that profession in their treatment of others. If we're going to read James, we must be prepared, we have to be prepared to ask ourselves, how well do my actions mirror my faith? We all seem to have little respect and tolerance for blatant hypocrisy. But what about those little bits of hypocritical living that seem to surface on a daily basis? They may be small, seemingly insignificant, unimportant things, but those are the situations that build character, and character is who you are when no one is looking. The following is from a modern hymn written by a pastor named Stephen M. Fearing back in 2018, and this is what he wrote. Keep our faith alive and thriving. Help us be your servants true. Stir our hearts to break with grief when hurting people cry for you. May our works reflect our preaching. May your worship change our ways. Make our mission full and fruitful, serving you with all our days. What good is it, gospel children, if you pray but fail to act? Is not faith a concrete practice, never only in abstract? May we live your gospel fully, hearing yes, but doing too. May our lives reflect your calling, not just when we're in our pew. Remember the old saying, which says, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care? That's what James is all about. This is Dr. Vic Hollyfriend in His grace. Have a tremendous week. God bless you. Go out there and demonstrate your faith. Let your lights shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. If you have any comments or questions, you can address them to me at vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. God bless you. Have a terrific week.